welcome back. Now we've talked about the definition of GDP, gross domestic product. Let's talk about the components of gross domestic product, GDP. It actually just it's a simple formula. Don't get too nervous. It's not much more math other than understanding what a symbol means and adding them up. Some subtraction. Y is basically in economics either income or output. It can also be expenditure because income equals expenditure. So Y, we think here just basically that is gross domestic product. That's our GDP. This is what we're producing. This is what we're consuming. Income equals expenditure. C, so Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX. You're like, that's great. You can read the board. What does that mean? Well, we have these different components. Again, Y is like GDP. C is consumption, what you're actually most familiar with. The American consumers, just like a great white shark. Great white sharks, they swim around and eat things. You guys walk around and buy things. All right. Investment, I. This is investment made both by people and largely businesses. We're going to break down each one of these components, don't worry. G is government spending. Government spending. G is the money that government spends. People are like, well, what do they spend money on? Well, every time you say, hey, the government should do this, or the government should do that, well, it takes money to do that. If the government should deliver the mail, they have to fill up the mail trucks with gasoline, which means they're buying gasoline every day. They have to pay their employees to deliver the mail. You have to have police officers have to have paper supplies for their offices, for all their reports. They have to have computers for the cars. You have to buy those things. So those things are all government spending. Net exports, and we're going to spend a little more time on net exports because net exports is exports minus imports, and I want to say that for just a moment, if you will. So Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX. GDP equals consumption spending plus investment spending plus government spending plus net exports. All right? So allow me to read directly from your hymnal here, your textbook. Consumption, spending, so this is C, spending by households on goods and services with the exception of the purchases of new housing. Why not new housing? Well, all right, so what are you buying? Goods and services, you're buying plumbing services, you're buying power, you're buying toilet paper for your house, food for your refrigerator, you're buying a refrigerator, a television, Xbox, whatever it is, you're buying all those things, those fall under C. Why not the house itself? Well, if you look at it, it's very, very rare that someone just straight up buys their house. Generally speaking, you borrow that money. If you think you own the house, stop paying the bank and they'll let you know who really owns the house. They'll take it from you. So residences, buying a house, fall under investment. What is investment? Spending on business capital. That's equipment. That's factories, business capital. Residential capital, so that's buying houses. And inventories. So if you go to Target or Walmart, you expect there to be some things on the shelf. Well, Target or Walmart had to buy those things to put them there for you to make them a final good where you buy them at checkout. Government purchases, spending on goods and services by local, state, and federal governments. That's another thing that people they hear government, they think federal government, they don't think about their local government. They don't think about their local town council who have to buy electric service, who have to buy internet service, who have to buy paper for their meetings, you have to buy laptops, etc., etc. Food for their, I don't know, junkets they hold with different lobbyists, I don't know. So government purchases, G. All right. Net exports, this is the tricky one. Net exports are spending on domestically produced goods made here, right? By foreigners over there. Exports minus spending on foreign goods by domestic residents. So, you basically have two different things here. Well, trade can make everyone better off. We've covered that in this course extensively, right? Trade can make everyone better off. Well, if something is made here, all right, in America, I'm going to make it over here, made here and sold there in another country, all right, it counts in GDP. We make it here. Let's say it goes out of the Port of Charleston on one of those big ships, you guys see those things, and it goes to another country. It was made here, counts in GDP, in our GDP. Now, those ships coming in and out of the Port of Charleston, they're also bringing stuff made in another country and bringing it and selling it here. Well, guess what? That counts in their GDP, not ours. Those are called imports. So if you ever go to the Port of Charleston, you see these big ships, you see these containers coming on and containers going off, and you know, the ones going on, made here, sold there. The ones coming off, made there, sold here. Only one of those things count towards our GDP. And if you think back to our definition, you will know that it has to be produced, goods and services produced within a country. So if it's made here and sold there, GDP. If it's made there and sold here, it's not in our GDP, it's in theirs. So it has to be made there. All right? Remember that on the homework and the test. Okay? So net exports are exports, that's stuff made here, sold there, counted in GDP, minus imports made there and sold here, not counted in US GDP. All right? You're going to need to give yourself some reps on that. Make sure you do the reading on that one, just to make sure you have that straight. Exports made here count in GDP. Imports made there do not count in GDP. So, what do you think we run in the United States in terms of a trade? Do we run a surplus where we export more than we import? Or do we run a deficit where we import way more than we export? Well, drum roll please. We run a trade deficit, which means we import far more than we export. Now that's not terrible. It's not the worst thing in the world. We live in the most powerful economy on the face of the earth. All right? Anybody want to debate me on the comments on that? Bring it. All right? We live in the most powerful economy on the face of the earth. We import far more than we export. Why? Because we buy more than we ever produce. The American consumer is the great white shark of consumerism. Great white shark knows he's the great white shark, swims around like a boss. He swims around and eats things. You guys walk around, you know you're the great white shark of consumerism. You walk around and buy things, even with money you don't have. We'll talk about that in the savings chapter and why that's a bad idea. Trade surpluses, though, some countries run trade surpluses. They don't have a great rich base for people to buy things worldwide, but they do produce a lot. All right? Trade surpluses are run when you have more exports than you have imports. All right? Come back for the third and final video, and we will introduce you to a very simplified economy where all we're looking at is consumption. So GDP basically comes down just to consumption, and it's honestly one of my favorites because I call it the hot dog economy. All we're doing is buying and selling hot dogs, maybe some hamburgers, we'll see at some point. But come back for that video and we will explain how GDP is calculated.